Hi, welcome to Confessions of a CEO, powered by RG. I'm delighted today to have Jo Whitfield on my podcast. Many of you will know Jo, but for those who don't, Jo is a seasoned professional. She qualified as a chartered accountant with Deloitte in Leeds before returning to the Northeast to join fund manager NEL and more latterly FW Capital to set up FW Capital's Northeast business. Since then, Jo has gone on to build a very successful business within FW Capital here in the region, providing much needed funding to privately owned, high growth, aspirational SMEs as they secure funding to make their next steps in their growth journey. I've known Jo for 12 years, both personally and professionally, but never once have I had the opportunity to spend some time with Jo on a podcast. So absolutely delighted to have Jo with us today. Jo, delighted to have you on my podcast today. Obviously, we've been friends for probably 12 years now, and we've worked together on so many transactions throughout that time. So I'm genuinely grateful and delighted to have you on my podcast today.
Thanks, Carl.
To kick things off, it would be really good to go right back, Jo, to where it started. Maybe just asking you to give me an insight into your early upbringing, because that might tell us a little bit about, why and how you ended up at Leeds University.
Yeah. Well, born and bred in Durham. So I grew up in Durham, went to school there, had a very happy childhood, some great parents, some great role models in there as well. And went to school at St Leonard's, a Catholic school for a while. It was a great school to go to, but actually I wanted to pursue 4 A levels and go to Johnson to do that, because otherwise I would have had to do RE as an A level,
right,
or an AS level.
Durham Johnson, the sixth form.
Yes, that's right. So I was there at sixth form, which was a lot of my friends were there as well. They lived around the doors locally, so it was nice, and a shorter walk to school as well, which was an
And was it
extra
you
bonus.
who drove that decision, Jo, or was it very much your parents who thought Durham Johnson was right for you?
No, actually it was me. My parents have been great, to be honest. They've encouraged me and supported me in whatever I've wanted to do, but they were never pushy. They never forced me to do anything. They never, forced me to continue to try and play the violin, which I did very badly at school. So I think my mum was pleased actually when I gave that up, because it was terrible when she was in the bath listening to me drone on. So yeah, but they've really supported me in what I've wanted to do. So it was very much my decision to do that, and it gave me the opportunity to do a kind of a 4th A level that wasn't. It was a bit more fun for me, I suppose.
Sure, yeah. Because as you say, perhaps religious education wouldn't have been an A-level you would have chose.
Yes, yeah. So I did my A-level that I chose was art. So I did, that was my 4th A-level, but I'm pretty sad that I was a further maths and physics girl, so there wasn't much fun in the other 3. So it was for me, but maybe not something to kind of release my creative streak, I suppose.
And hey, it's all about balance, right? So perhaps those 3 very academically demanding A levels were balanced out slightly with an art A level, which as you say is much more creative, maybe less academically demanding, more artistically demanding. Yeah,
it was great. So, it led on to me wanting to go to university. A lot of my friends did at the time. So I went on to Leeds to study mathematical engineering. Oh. So it was kind of a joint honours of mechanical engineering with pure maths.
Okay.
So it was tough.
And why Leeds University, Jo?
Leeds reminded me of Newcastle, but it was just a bit further away. So I wanted that kind of independence and feel like I was properly away from home and living somewhere new, experiencing new things. So that was really important, but it felt very much like home.
Yes, similar city in terms of Newcastle and Leeds.
Yeah, it was a really good feel about the place, and exciting city, lots of students, and a fabulous university.
And you said a lot of your friends went to uni. Did they also go to Leeds University?
There was a couple of them did actually, but we were flung sort of across the country, really, lots of different places, but a couple did. So it was good to have that kind of support. If you knew that you were having a bad day or whatever, you knew there was some really good friends there.
Yes. And you spoke there quite precisely about knowing that you wanted to go to university, and particularly Leeds. Did you know when you decided to go to Leeds University, fundamentally, what you wanted to end up doing after your degree, or could you not see that far at that time?
Absolutely not. I had no idea. I'm ashamed to say. When I was very much younger, I thought I would be an accountant, because if you're good at maths, that was the career advice at the time,
sure,
wasn't
that's
it?
Right.
Accountant or banker. So
Yeah.
I thought I decided from a young age that's what I would do. But I didn't actually think by the time I'd left uni that I would do that. But I applied for a few different jobs. With the joint honours, I kind of looked at some engineering options. But also applied for some finance and accounting options, and actually Deloitte came back first, and I was desperate for a job and some cash, I'm ashamed to say. But it was a great opportunity. You know, I fell on my feet, and fantastic opportunity to train with such a great firm. And it was a great step. You've probably felt the same, that
Totally.
You go from university and then into a big firm like that. You've got a peer group around you, so it feels like sort of an extension of that kind of training environment that you went through at uni. But the great thing is you got paid at the end of the month.
That's right. Yeah, you got a paycheck.
Yes.
And who was the single person, Jo, that perhaps helped you make that transitional step from university to a professional career with Deloitte? Was there one person who helped you appreciate what your options actually were? Or did you just self-educate and find opportunity yourself?
Yeah, I think look, I talked to my peers, I talked to my parents. I mean, neither of my parents had gone to uni, so they didn't have that experience of that transition. Mm-hmm. But certainly my dad had worked all of his life, started off as an apprentice, and could really see the benefit of starting somewhere on a training path effectively to develop quickly. So that was really good, and he was really proud of me to get the opportunity to do that, and supported me through. I don't think he could understand how hard the accountancy exams were going to be, but
no, I don't think either of us probably understood either.
A distant memory, thank goodness. So
I agree.
It was tough.
I agree. And you mentioned, Jo, that neither of your parents went to university. Yeah. How do you think, therefore, they responded to the idea of you going to university, given, of course, it's something they probably knew little about? Yeah,
no, that's right. I think they were just really proud of me. They were, they really wanted to support me to do that. I think they were sad to see me move away for 3 years.
Well, that's your side of the story.
Maybe clapping when I left and
That's
everything.
right.
Pleased that they didn't have to answer the phone a lot to my friends whilst I was away.
That's right.
But yeah, I think that they were really pleased that I got the opportunity, and they could probably really see how quickly it helped me to develop as a person, to become more self-sufficient.
Yes.
So when I ended up coming back and getting my job in Newcastle. So I moved back in with them for a while, but whilst I loved living with them, I didn't want to get too comfortable, because I knew I would. So I needed to move out quickly, otherwise I probably still would have been there.
That's right. That's right.
So it was good. It was good that they supported me through.
And given you talked about the desire you had to go to Leeds University for independence, to have freedom, what was the reason you decided to relocate back to the Northeast when you joined Deloitte? Given, of course, I'm sure there'd have been training contract opportunities in Leeds with Deloitte.
Yeah, and actually that was what I was interested in at the start, because actually it was a Leeds or Newcastle role with the intention to start an operation in the public sector from the Newcastle base and open an office and a kind of a team in Leeds. So there was an opportunity to work in Leeds, but they wanted me to start in Newcastle first, which wasn't my first option actually. But since I did that, I'm actually really pleased. Things happen for a reason. I'm very much a believer of that. So I was going to come to Newcastle and then move to Leeds, but actually I just ended up staying here because it's such a fabulous city to work in and live around, and you make some great friends, don't you?
Oh, you do.
And it's a really great professional community, so nice to be part of that.
I agree. I think in the Northeast, it's easy to overlook the fact that I think we've got best of both. A really vibrant, very capable professional services community, but actually a beautiful place to live because of the countryside, the coastal places that we can visit all within sort of half an hour. Right, yeah. So it is a beautiful place to live and do business, as you say.
No, definitely, and I think the Northeast punches above its weight actually in terms of professional services and opportunities, and the community here.
Yeah, I agree. So obviously, as you say, you joined Deloitte. Your ACA exams were demanding, challenging, stressful, and all of those things. But nonetheless, you're here to tell the tale. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome during your time at Deloitte outside of the professional qualification, Jo?
That's a tough question. I think, managing the dynamic of what was most important. We worked in a department which was really stretched in terms of resource. So having time to do the study as well as putting your whole self into the work and the job that you were doing. And I found that really difficult because my instinct and the way that I've been brought up is do your job first. And, so I prioritise the work day, which means it's, even more challenging to fit in the study. And we were travelling quite a lot at the time as well, which was difficult in our department. So living out of a bag, coming home and having to do the washing, see the family and do your study was tough at the time.
And how did you find the time to give your day job everything and to study to the extent you have to qualify? How did you actually manage that?
I think it's just hard graft. You got to put in, you got to put in what you get out, don't you? And I think, you do make personal sacrifices. You have to say no to people. You can't always do what you want to do in order to get through that period. And it was tough. And sleep a little bit less. I learned to survive on, whilst I was at Deloitte, I did learn to survive on, limited sleep, I suppose, through the week, which I'm not proud of, and I know it's not good for you, but it was what you did to get through the day, really.
And just on that, obviously now more so than then, people are really alive to the need to have balance, the need to be mentally well. Just talk me through how you think you would approach your studies and work balance were you to have your time again, with one eye on the need to have balance?
Yeah, and I think it is, and it was a different time then, wasn't it? And I think people are more mindful, and I suppose the generations that come behind us are more mindful of that balance, I think, which is great. I think you've got to be a bit more selfish, I suppose, and look after yourself, but that's not something that comes easily for me. So whether I'd do it differently, honestly, Carl, I'm just not sure I could tell you that. But I would want other people to do it differently. And I suppose the way that I manage the team dynamic that we have now is very much actually, do you know what, there's things that are much more important than work. And if something happens in somebody's life, you need to get on with that first, because I know that takes priority to what's going on at work. So I'm very much, I don't necessarily do what I preach, I'm ashamed to say, but that's, I don't expect that of others.
And just to talk about that a bit more, so you've sort of just said that you don't practice what you preach, in so many words. Just talk me through why you find it difficult to do the things that you expect of others when it comes to balance and being a little more in control over where you deploy your time, so that you have the right time to do all of the things that are important to you. Yeah,
and I think I like to fill my life with things, and it's not all about work for me. I do other things. I challenge myself outside of work as well, and I've got a great husband and a couple of two fantastic bulldogs that I love spending time with. And I go and see family in Ireland as well. So it's not all about work for me, but it's always been a big priority. It's always been a constant in my life that I kind of have enjoyed and also relied on when, things have been tough, I suppose. So it's, maybe I have got more balance than I used to have.
Yes.
Maybe I'm being unfair to myself.
Sure. And what do you think over the years has acted as the catalyst to allow you to find a balance that you're comfortable with, acknowledging your balance, my balance is different? So what do you think has allowed you to find your feet with that?
I think that, some big things happen in life, don't they? I think, and actually, a big thing happened to us personally. Me and Stu is, he was diagnosed with a pretty serious heart condition, which fundamentally changed our world, I suppose. And it does make you think, you know, there are some things that are more important, and that had to be priority, and supporting him through what was a horrible few years of, you know, treatment, diagnosis, all of that sort of thing. But actually, you know, it just makes you stop and think. And Stu is, you know, he's had that life-defining moment. He sort of said, you know, nobody's ever going to write on the headstone that they, you know, worked really hard and everything. You know, it's not necessarily going to be the thing that you want to be remembered for, which is true. But actually, it's not about working hard for me. It's about results. It's about what comes because of that. And that's what drives me. I want to see people succeed. And that's not just, you know, it's not just within my team. It's the broader organisation I work for.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, isn't it, that perspective that a health or life-defining moment brings, because up until that point, you know, if things go your way, if you've got health, actually, you can run the risk of thinking you're invincible. And as soon as the rug is pulled, from a health perspective, do you realise for the first time what's actually important? And I don't know whether you and Stu agree, but you know, we as a family had a similar health issue, and as a consequence, the perspective I have now, I never had before that. It was actually something that, on reflection, I'm glad happened. Because I think that we are achieving much more as a consequence of having better perspective.
Well, I think that, and I think, you know, I think it's helped me to build a team and a dynamic where people have really been able to step up, and some opportunities for development. And I am absolutely not worried about going away on holiday now. I used to be, because we didn't have the strength and depth in the team. And I have that now, and that's been really great. And that's been a huge change in the last, I would say, 6 years to do that and give people the opportunity and see them flourish. It's brilliant, and I love that. It's a really, you know, it's a really humbling part of your job, isn't it, to see people's career develop and be able to support people in a way that helps them push on.
Yeah, agree, totally. And sometimes, you know, people have the ability and appetite but aren't given the chance. But of course, the converse is true. Sometimes people are given the chance and not have the ability or the appetite. So establishing who's who early is important in any business, isn't it? You mentioned, Jo, that one constant in your life to this point has been your work ethic, you know, your desire and willingness to work incredibly hard to create great outcomes, which I totally respect. Where do you think that sort of innate desire to want to work hard comes from?
I just think a lot of it was my dad. I mean, there was weeks that went by that he used to work 7 days a week in Thorney MI in Spennymoor.
Yeah, gosh.
Man and boy, he was there. Sadly, he died when he was 58, so he still was working there.
Wow.
Actually, when he died, all the way from an apprenticeship, he worked there. But he used to work so hard, and also, you know, do things. He was a welder as well, so he used to make gates.
Okay.
So made gates for quite a few people around the doors and things
as
well,
hobby,
just
almost.
As a hobby to make a few quid that he could maybe spend down the club with the boys. So, but he did used to, you know, he worked hard, and it was very important to him that you tried hard. If you tried hard, didn't matter what happened, as long as you tried your best. And I think that's kind of where it came from. And my mum as well, you know, she was one of those mums that you didn't want as a child, because until you'd actually been sick, you weren't allowed to stay off school. You had to get there, you know. So I was always pushed out of the door, no matter how bad I felt. But actually, it creates a resilience, doesn't it?
It does.
And that's sort of, it's drummed into you at a young age. So actually, that's been, I suppose that's, you know, that's where I think it's come from. I blame them.
No, well, as you say, you know, when you're young, you observe, and if all you saw was your mum and dad working 24/7, 7 days a week, you know, to provide, then naturally that will have had an impact on your outlook and how you think you can add value. Hard work should equal output.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Somebody said to me a long time ago, which is really true. I think, you know, it's not about luck, is it? If you work hard, you get a lot more lucky. And I think, you know, I really believe that. So make the best of it.
Yeah, well, that's right. I think hard work often means your odds improve, but a little luck along the way helps.
Yes, definitely.
You mentioned, Jo, very sadly, that your father passed away when he was 58, which is super young. If you don't mind me asking, how did he pass away?
Oh, he had cancer, so he was very well his whole life, and he fell ill, and they discovered he had cancer, but it was secondary, so there was nothing they could do about it. So he went downhill quite quite quickly, unfortunately. So it was tough. You know, I was only 26 at the time, so relatively young, but a lot of, you know, we had some great times together, and an avid Newcastle supporter, he would love what's going on at the moment, honestly.
Yeah, as a Sunderland fan, he might appreciate it more than I currently do, but
it's all right.
I appreciate
My
the
husband
point.
Stu is a Sunderland fan as well, so he has to live with me at the moment. So, but yes, he would be really pleased about that. But yeah, you know, it was a long time ago now, but a lot of the things that I've learned from him still stay with me.
Yeah, which is incredible in terms of his legacy, living on through you, which of course would be something he'd be super proud of, without doubt. And obviously, whilst that would have been a really catastrophic, devastating time, is there anything on reflection you can say you were able to take from that awful set of circumstances, which has helped you in your life since?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, something like that happens early on. It's awful and you can't change what's happened, but actually it's about kind of repositioning how you feel about it. And what it made me think is, I really appreciate every day. I rarely say no to things, because I want to fill my life full of things. I want to do things. I want to stretch myself. And I think that's what it taught, because time is short and you never know what's going to happen. You know, my dad was absolutely working as hard as he could to retire, and he never did. And I just think, well, you know, what a shame that was, but he wouldn't have changed it. He wouldn't have changed it. So it's, live for the moment. Do think about the future, but live for the moment, and make sure that you do all of those things and take the opportunities when they present themselves.
Yeah, I think I'd love your perspective on something. So I think obviously you and I have had in our life instances that have caused us to have to stop and recalibrate, which is where you get this perspective from, and this acknowledgement that you shouldn't take anything for granted, because one day will be your last. How do you think you can encourage people to have that same outlook, who haven't necessarily had to overcome adversity or loss?
Yeah, and
is there a way you can encourage people to benefit from the hindsight you've got without them having to go through the heartache that you've gone through?
Yeah, and I think it's difficult, isn't it? I think it's in people, and some people don't have to go through that. They can see it in others. They can see other people's circumstances and think, oh goodness, I'm going to learn from that. But I think innately it's got to be in you. You've got to have that drive within you and that outlook to perhaps think, there is another way of looking at things. There is another way of looking at things that perhaps don't go your way, to feel grateful that you've had the opportunity to have a different perspective, or grateful that you've got other opportunities to consider as a direct result. And I think it's about, for me, I've had the benefit of some coaching, you know, talking to leadership coaches and stuff over the years, and which has been brilliant, and actually having that outside perspective. And you know, you try and pass some of those things on, don't you?
Of course you do.
And you talk about that, and hope that people find that helpful and useful as well. And I think when it comes down to it, everybody has tough times, and even if they haven't yet, they will. And I think if you can prepare people for that, then that's a real benefit as well. And they can see that perhaps the way that other people deal with adversity, and perhaps they can learn something from that to equip themselves better for when it happens to them. You know.
That's right. It's interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, sadly, you know, in our lives, we'll all have challenges. You know, there'll be roadblocks, there'll be obstacles. It's just the way of the world. And I think what's fascinating is to observe how certain people respond and react. And of course, it's not what happens that defines you, it's how you respond. Which is exactly what you're saying. So I totally agree with that. Earlier you mentioned that what drives you is helping others, helping businesses. That probably allows us to move on to talk about your current role as sort of investment/fund director at FW Capital. Obviously you've been in role for a very long time now, and you've done a phenomenal job at developing FW Capital here in region. Could you just give me an insight into overall what you think your and FW Capital's biggest achievement has been to date in this region, Jo?
Yeah, I think still being here.
Existence.
Existing. So I think, 13 years ago, we opened our first office outside of Wales, which was Newcastle. And that was when I came across the company. And actually, I had an interesting discussion with one of our non-exec directors at the group level, who recently talked to us after we'd been presenting to talk to them about how FW Capital was doing, myself and my, another director, Gary from the Northwest. And we told him how we were doing today. And he said, look, I'm really, really overjoyed how well it's going. And I never thought it would work.
Really?
And and that was from one of the non-exec directors of the group company. And he said, you've done a great job, amazing. You've gone on to that first fund, it was £20 million up in the Northeast. As a team, my team last year invested 25 million in the year, so that shows the level of growth that we've gone on since then, because that first fund was meant to be invested over 5 years. So it's, I think it's just, we were an export from Wales, and I think we've become part of the furniture in the Northeast. We provide products and customer service, in an area which needs it. Small and medium businesses need support that they can't ordinarily get from the high street. And that's where we can step into the breach in terms of the funds that we manage and some of the funds designs that we come up with to look at market need and where there might be gaps that we can really support smaller businesses to develop and grow. And I get it's such a buzz to see what you can do locally in the area that you live and work, the difference that it can make to businesses, but also the people that work in those businesses. And what sense of pride the team can get from doing that, creating loads of jobs and, doing things other than just providing cash. My team are very, very good at adding value to businesses, both, in that discussion phase when you're looking to invest, or maybe if you can't invest, but also once they're through the door and they're in the portfolio, we really try our hardest to make the most of that relationship and add value to their business during the course of that investment too. So it's really good, and I get a real buzz out of it. I love it, whilst being an accountant was great. I'm really pleased I work in investment now. I think it gave me the opportunity to do what I really love, which is this.
And obviously for anyone watching the podcast, it would probably be helpful, Jo, if you could just explain a little bit about the type of funding that FW Capital can provide, and on what basis, just in case anyone watching the podcast owns a business and is looking for funding.
Yeah, so we provide, we can provide finance to trading businesses to support their growth. So we invest from the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund, and it's a debt finance fund, so it's a loan. We provide loans up to 5 years at the moment, from 100,000 up to 750,000. It's across most of the north of England we can invest. However, the Northeast LEP area has got their own funds that we're not responsible for managing. But in this part of the world, then we've got a couple of property funds that we can invest. So we're also supporting developers to bring forward both residential and commercial schemes, and we're helping them build effectively. So we're taking that development finance risk, and then typically, residential units will be sold clearly, but also usually a bank or a mainstream finance provider would come in at the back end to do a commercial mortgage, or an investor to do some to take that asset on for the longer term, and we've done the build effectively.
Yes, got it.
So we can provide those development finance loans from 2 million for residential, and actually up to 7 million for commercial finance. Commercial development, sorry.
Got it, thank you. And you mentioned, sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I can't possibly not go back and ask a question on it. You mentioned that the non-exec director of FW Capital nationally, when you caught up with him recently, when you were reflecting on what had been achieved regionally, he said to you that actually they never thought FW Capital would be successful in the Northeast. Why do you think he was of that opinion?
I think it was because it was such a big leap from an operation that had only worked in Wales and suddenly having the suggestion that there was going to be an outpost up in the northeast of England. I think, how on earth is that going to work? How are we going to keep that culture tight? How are we going to make sure that operation runs in the same way and can contribute to effectively the whole of the operation in Wales too? But I think we've really demonstrated how we can do that, and he was really positive about it. He didn't think it was a bad thing. He just thought it was too big a leap at the time for us, and didn't have any idea that would be an operation pan the north, and also now opening new offices in the southwest quite recently, and other offices that we're hoping to open as well. So we're growing, and we're growing our funds under management as well, and our product range, because we want to do more of what we do.
Presumably to support more businesses, to create more employment opportunity and to improve GDP in these regions, right?
Exactly, exactly, and it's all about supporting the core of where you are and developing those regions and doing as much as you can for those regions that we operate. So.
And obviously your absolute commitment to helping businesses in the Northeast prosper shows. Let me ask, how do you, though, for your own self, define your success? Because of course, like me, we spend all of our time helping others achieve success in their own environments. Yeah. So how do you sort of determine whether you yourself, Jo, have been successful in your own eyes?
I think it's about I think for me, it's about the team. Oh. Where are the team at? I love the fact that, I really want to create an environment where we can perform highly as a team and get the most out of each other. And it's really important to me to care about what you do, but also care about the people that you do it with. See what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I think that building that trust, building that commitment and confidence as a team is really important. And going back to Newcastle, you've seen that, and what's happening in the football team.
Oh, phenomenal!
Actually working together as a team is a huge, powerful tool to deliver success, and that is what I define as success. Is where is FW Capital at? It's a business that I feel has got a brand in the north of England, a really strong brand. That's really important to me, and it's really important to me that the team are doing well and thriving, and we're giving them every opportunity to succeed.
Well, that's really inspirational, Jo. And if your team were here, I'm sure without doubt they would agree that you gave them the support and the freedom to achieve success in their own careers. So congratulations in that regard. One thing I just wanted to get your take on, which is something that is becoming increasingly more talked about and as a consequence profiled, is, I guess, discrimination within business, and specifically, I guess, gender discrimination. Yeah. Could you just give me an insight into whether you feel, as you've achieved career success, that the fact you are female has hindered you or not?
I think it's a different world we live in today than it was when I started. And I don't want to go back to those times. And it's been tough, I would say, when you're in the minority. Which you are. You've been to the black tie dinners when I've been there, and actually the balance is becoming much better, isn't
Agreed.
It?
Absolutely,
Which is great. But it's difficult, but you can work it to your advantage. This is the thing about repositioning, isn't it? Whilst it's difficult to be in the minority, people notice you more. So in a crowd of people that you stand out a bit more. So actually, it's about, potentially using that and not being frightened of it. And I feel like I've been lucky that I've had the opportunities, and none of the opportunities that have come to my door, it's not held me back, but I can understand why it's difficult, and it's not the same. And it's, perhaps things have and still are in some respects difficult, more difficult, depending on your circumstances, particularly if you've got a family. And, we're working in an environment where you have to work all hours.
That's right.
That we do, and it's not possible if you're in that caring environment. So, or caring for an older person. So, I think it's much better, and I think that the generations coming through will not tolerate the behaviour that was accepted when I was a young pup.
Yeah, no.
Thankfully,
I really respect what you said, and actually, your perspective on the subject is quite interesting, because clearly a lot of the protected characteristics that we talk about can be described as minorities, which of course in itself infers negativity. But as you say, actually, if you are the only male or female in the room, or the only white or black person in a room, there are two ways in which you can view that. Either you are in the minority, there is discrimination at play, or perhaps you are unique and you stand out. And it's just a perspective on the same facts, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's, look, there's, obviously discrimination is a tough subject, isn't it? And I think it's, the workplace, we've got to be very open to diversity, and actually it's really important. And giving people opportunities and making sure that people feel included is really important to me. And again, I suppose, giving people the option to, if they can see somebody being successful or a role model in that environment, then they've got, it's easier to be it, isn't it?
Of course it is. So
it's about diversity, it's about encouraging that. And I think that, there are times that it can work for you, but clearly there's lots of times when, when it's more difficult and people are discriminated against, and it's about making sure that everybody's on the side of not making that acceptable. And being open to having difference in the team, having different perspectives, different cultural backgrounds, and and gender backgrounds.
Exactly. And let me ask a question, because within private equity now, the need to have a diverse, inclusive board is becoming topical. And some private equity houses have gone as far as saying there must be female representation on a board. Do you think that's the right answer, to be prescriptive about the fact that 1 of 4 directors must be female? Because I wonder whether that in itself is in fact discriminatory.
Yeah, and it's a minefield, Carl, honestly, and it's something that you deliberate against, for and against, don't you? I think we need basic diversity in the board situation, and to allow people to have an environment to work in where there's more understanding and a greater appreciation from a broader base as to what colleagues are going through, and look at things in a different way, right? But what I find very difficult is positive discrimination, because it's a very difficult subject, and unfortunately some of it has to happen in order to accelerate change. That's the difficulty. But being in a situation where you are the person that is positively discriminated is impossible.
Of course it is.
And it's impossible for peer groups around you, and it creates, bad feeling, doesn't it? And that's not what people want. And people want to feel like they've got to where they are because they deserve it, not because of the colour of their skin or what gender they are or whatever. That's not right either, is it? No. So that's a very, very challenging environment. And I think, you can do as much as you can to open up diversity, and you can do as much as you can to try and create that. But I find it very difficult to prescribe something where actually it might not be the right thing for the organisation as a whole.
As you say, Jo, it's a really difficult topic, and I think you have to be really conscientious and very open-minded when discussing the subject. Fascinatingly, there was an event 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, and there were 50 professionals in a room. And can you believe there was only 1 female and 49 males? And I actually specifically spoke to the lady during the course of the event, and she said to me that not only did she feel that the event wasn't aimed at females, but particularly as a consequence of the time of the event. It was 7:30 a.m. till 9:30 a.m. and she said a lot of my peers who are female often will choose to take their children to school, which means an event at that time would never work for them, which is fascinating, because I'm sure the event organizer did not in any way intend to isolate a proportion of the potential guests, but subconsciously, so indirectly, perhaps there was an inability for a particular demographic to attend. So it is fascinating, because sometimes it's subconscious discrimination.
Completely, and I think we're an organisation that trains all of our team on unconscious bias and make sure that we're when we're recruiting, we're opening up channels to make sure that everybody's got an equal opportunity to be able to come and apply for a job or a role with us. And, you know, certainly the environment that I work in DBW, 51% of colleagues actually are female, which is really unusual.
It is.
Across the whole of our organisation, which is nearly 300 strong now. So that's different, I think, in finance.
I think that's right.
You know, and I think in terms of seniors, there are plenty of seniors in the team who have, you know, been in principal childcare roles and things like that, which it hasn't held them back. And I think that comes from working for a flexible organisation that is accepting of different people's circumstances and won't let them hold that back in terms of their career progression. But not everybody is like that, and I think it depends on, you know, the senior leadership as well. And that's when they say, you know, the diversity at the board is really important. So if it takes some positive discrimination in the short term to achieve a goal of actually being a more rounded organisation in the longer term, then maybe that's, you know, maybe it has to be so, but it is a very, very difficult place to be.
It is. And it goes back to what you said earlier about practicing what you preach. I think a lot of people talk very positively about making sure that they are inclusive in the way in which they recruit, develop and appraise people, but then you look at their workforce and perhaps that suggests otherwise. So definitely, I think, as you say, positive discrimination, whilst I think there is a better way of approaching it, it at least means it's at the forefront of everybody's mind, which is right. It's got to be right.
Yeah,
sure.
It's got to be right. It's got to be the right thing for the organisation in the longer term.
Agree.
And the individuals.
Correct.
For goodness sake.
That's it. No, I agree, Jo. So tell me, obviously, you've now achieved with FW Capital regionally a significant amount of success, helping hundreds of businesses achieve success that they wouldn't have been able to were FW Capital not able to help them finance their growth aspirations. What comes next for you outside of FW Capital? And by that I mean, what will motivate you to continually be inspired, to continue to support the businesses in the way in which you clearly are today, Jo?
Yeah, well, I think it's about changing role, isn't it? And I suppose my role a lot lately has been about fundraising and about thinking for the longer term. And that is because I'm very lucky to have a great leadership team around me. So myself and some colleagues have been really thinking about that. How can we push on with FW Capital? How can we take it to the next level? What can we do to add and complement what we already have and support the teams for the longer term? So it's been great to be doing that and have the opportunity to do that, work with new stakeholders, you know, talk about what we've managed to achieve in FW Capital and actually where we want to take it. And that is actually nice to do sometimes because you can be very stuck in the day job and just getting on with it. But standing back and actually saying, do you know what? The team's done brilliant there, you know, and actually, you know, presenting that to others who are keen to get involved and keen to work with you. I think that is really, you know, really enthuses me and it excites me for the future. And, you know, where we are as a fund manager, you tend to go in cycles. So you've got 5-year investment cycles tends to be on in funds. And it's great to be in a place where not everything stops at the same time. So, you know, we're really lucky in the property funds. One of the funds runs for 12 years in terms of the investment, which we just launched in January, which is really exciting. I'm thinking, goodness, how old am I going to be then? So, you know, whether or not I'll be at FW Capital, who knows, you know, but I think it's, you know, things like that really, really make you think you're creating an operation which is going to provide sustainable finance for the regions that we operate. And that's my goal. Look, it's not about cliff edges. It's not about just doing one thing for one person. It is about multiple stakeholders and delivering for them all and complementary products and building strong teams that are multi-talented, I suppose, can, you know, turn their hand to different things, and it makes it more interesting for them when they get up out of bed on a morning.
Of course it does. And what an incredibly exciting legacy that you've just pointed to, because I think the word I heard there, Jo, which is really important, is sustainability. You're building a business that will sustain itself long beyond your and your colleagues' time in the business, because at some point we will all, hang up our boots and perhaps, spend less time doing what we love doing today. Obviously, you have spent your entire career to this point either within large international corporates, Deloitte, or large national businesses like FW Capital. Just to ask, do you have an itch when it comes to sort of wanting to run your own business? Do you have like an entrepreneurial itch to scratch, just thinking about your pops making his garden gates in the garden shed? I mean, is this something that he's passed on to you or not?
Do you know, definitely, and it definitely was when I was at Deloitte, I was thinking I would love to run my own business. Now, actually, I feel like I feed that itch a little bit with what I do, because I see lots of different businesses doing lots of great things. And actually, sometimes you think, God, I don't know how these people do it. I mean, the responsibility for paying other people's mortgages is huge, right? So, and I think that is something to be absolutely celebrated and not underestimated.
I agree.
So I keep on thinking maybe this is the year that I'll have that brilliant idea and I'll sail off into the sunset and do something. But actually, do you know what? I feel like I am running my own business in FW Capital in the areas that we work in. Myself and my colleague in the Northwest, it feels very much like, the babies that we've created, and we're working together to develop that. So whilst it's not really my own business, it feels like I've got the autonomy to make it my own.
Yeah, well, you've took accountability, responsibility and autonomy, so you run it like your own, which is why it's been so successful. Yeah. But as you say, fundamentally, perhaps you don't carry some of the risks that one would if it was in fact your own business.
Yeah. I'd sleep even less then.
Well, that's right. I mean, you take your 5 hours a night to 4, Jo, which isn't good, and certainly not sustainable, I suggest. Obviously, a lot of people, Jo, who I've had on this podcast who have been employees and have become employers have said one thing, and it's been quite consistent actually, so I'd love to get your view on this. Their perspective has been each time, and this has been unanimous, the only regret is not doing it sooner. So can I just sort of ask you about, at what point you might conclude that perhaps your own venture isn't something you'll pursue, because I guess the last thing we all want in life is to regret not doing something.
Yeah, I know, and I suppose I don't feel like I'm going to have missed an opportunity to run my own ship. But if there was an opportunity, I might be interested.
I'm going to leave that one with you.
Yeah.
No, I think the challenge though in what you've said, and I think it's a really interesting subject actually, because employee-employer is a very different conundrum, relationship, set of duties and responsibilities, as you highlight. Certainly when it comes to, having to pay salaries of 1,000 people, and if you don't, they don't pay their mortgages. I mean, it is quite overwhelming. But I do think the fine line between being an employee and an employer is so fine.
Yeah.
And rarely have I met an entrepreneur who regrets having pursued their ambition to run a business. In fact, it's always the opposite. People wish they had done sooner. So an interesting conundrum.
It definitely is, and it's something that I always think about. But actually, the people that we work with and the businesses I see, it's a different thing altogether, isn't it? It's a different thing, and I have huge respect for. I've met some fantastically skilled people, some really clever individuals who've done amazing things, and if you're just running your own business, actually, you don't have the benefit of seeing all of that.
No, you don't.
And experiencing other people's businesses and seeing their journeys, which I get a huge thrill out of.
Yeah, no, I respect that. I've got one huge question to leave us with, Jo, because I could sit here and chat to you all day, but sadly, I'm sure time on your side will mean that's not possible. So my final question for today is, obviously, your career has been very successful, and to someone who doesn't know you, to someone who will perhaps look at your success, they could be wrong in assuming everything has just went beautifully. There's been no obstacles, no challenges, and actually, you are just an overnight success is what people could see, because they'll not know the sacrifice, the hard work, the 2 a.m. finishes, because they don't see that. So my question is, on reflection, in hindsight, if you could sit down with Jo, who was in her final year at Leeds University, thinking about what comes next, what bit of advice would you give you?
Be braver, worry less. I'm a worrier at heart, so you gotta worry less and just try and have the confidence in yourself that you can do it. And I think that's huge. Confidence is a massive thing for everybody starting out, isn't it? And I think if you can instill that confidence in people to try things, because if things don't go well, that is not, it's not the end of the world. And somebody very clever, I was thinking about this on the way up, somebody very clever told me something once, and he said, right, it's about putting things into perspective, okay? And it's on the kind of the perspective scale, 1 to 10, right? 1 being everything's fine, 10, has anybody died? So just think about it like that. And it was Alistair Waite from Onyx that told me about this.
Yes.
He said, just think, where are you at on the scale? As long as you're not a 10, and there is some times where that might happen, but hopefully not very often. There are some times that might happen, but every other thing is on that scale, and actually it helps you to put it behind you and think, yes, things could be worse here. So let's just move on, let's learn, and let's move on.
And I'm going to have to ask, sadly, a linked question.
Oh no.
If you were able to have had that conversation with yourself, and therefore you have your time again, what would being braver have allowed you to achieve that you haven't?
Maybe, I think making a jump earlier to maybe step up. I think I was ready to step up before I did.
Okay, so to demand more sooner.
Yeah.
And to run faster as a consequence, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And but actually recognising that now, it's very easy with hindsight, isn't it? And actually you can still learn an awful lot from that and the things that happen to you. And I think that has given me the ability to potentially look at that and how I support the team now, and make sure that we're providing those development opportunities, we're providing those opportunities for people to develop their careers. And sometimes that means leaving, and I'm always really pleased with people if they get a great opportunity, and if it's elsewhere, it's hopefully there's somebody that is still within our network that knows us, that knows how we work, and they'll still work with us regardless of them not being in the same company anymore.
No, that's a very conscientious attitude to have, and my view is always do what's right by the person.
Yeah.
If you do that, it'll be right by the business. It has to be, rather than the other way around.
People remember, don't they? And hopefully, and I just think that operating with integrity and honesty and having people's best interests at heart is really important, because that builds trust, and trust is something that is huge.
That's right. Hard to earn and easy to
Very
lose.
Easy to lose.
And you mentioned Alistair Waite,
Yes.
of course, who was the CEO of Onyx. Let me ask, do you still have the chair that Alistair Waite delivered to your offices? Do you?
I do. The zebra chair, the famous zebra chair.
I know all about the famous zebra chair.
Prized possession of mine, and I'll never forget that. He's somebody that I learned from very early in my career and could support, and I'll pass across a few times, but yes, you reap what you sow, I think.
You do. No, Alistair's a great man, and he actually has told me that story more than once. So for sure,
I'll send you a picture of it.
Do, but I think the reason I mentioned that is small gestures go a long way.
They do.
Sure, if they come from the heart.
Yeah, they do. And,
Jo, massive thanks for joining my podcast. It's been brilliant spending some time with you. I appreciate your candor, your insights and honesty, and I'm confident many of our guests will benefit hugely from some of your insights. So thank you for joining us, Jo.
Thanks, Carl. It's been a pleasure.
It's been fantastic spending some time with Jo Whitfield today on our Confessions of a CEO podcast. It's brilliant to be able to find out more about what motivates Jo and why it is she is so keen to continue to provide much needed support and funding to high growth, ambitious SMEs here in the northeast of England. Obviously, it was sad to hear about the passing of Jo's father when he was only 52, but what was really inspiring was to hear how Jo chose to take opportunity from adversity and to benefit perspective-wise. It's been brilliant spending a little time with Jo just to really understand some of the challenges she's overcome, some of the great successes she's achieved, and I think more importantly, some of the things that perhaps were she to have her time again, she may choose to approach differently. If you would like to watch the full podcast or indeed any of our other podcasts with other guests, please do take a look at RG social media feeds or indeed YouTube. But for now, you've been watching Confessions of a CEO. My name is Carl Swansbury, and I look forward to seeing you on future Confessions of a CEO podcasts.